Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Just touched on how much money it could actually cost Texas to retain that roster. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the guys who are replacing NFL first-round draft picks. First guy, obviously, going to be a huge hole to fill in Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. Obviously, number 6 overall pick to the Raiders. This is a guy that ran for 2,700 yards last year, even more all-purpose yards. A guy that has had crazy production the past 2 seasons, and a guy that you can't just replace. There's not going to be a person that comes in and immediately replaces Ashton Jeanty's production, but there's a couple guys here that could potentially step into the role. So the hope right now is that Sire Gaines probably takes over as the main running back here for Boise State. This was a guy, he appeared in 3 games last year, recorded 200 yards from scrimmage, had 110 rushing yards on, I think, 13 rushes. So a guy that's pretty exciting as a running back prospect. Then he missed time with a lower body injury, kind of lingered throughout the spring. Coach Danielson, so he hasn't really been practicing right now, Sire Gaines, but Coach Spencer Danielson, he said he's not concerned one bit about Gaines' injury and whether it will impact his availability for preseason camp and the season. So this is a guy that should be ready to go, and Boise fans should be excited about what he can do potentially. But this is going to be a room that I think is probably going to be multiple guys. I don't know if we're going to see one bell cow take over. Jahdae Barron is another guy that could potentially be an option. He rushed for over 300 yards in 2023. Is a junior now. A guy that could step up into that role, into the spotlight there. I also think Malik Sherrod, this is kind of the wild card here for Boise State. 6th-year senior, transferred from Fresno State, but a guy that in 2023 rushed for nearly 1,000 yards, also had 44 receptions during that time. So I think this is a guy at the minimum that will definitely play a third down receiving type back role, but this is probably going to be a replacement by committee. There's no way you can just replace what Ashton Jeanty did for Boise State with one player. That's a Herculean task that I frankly would not want to put on any one running back, just considering the way the guy produced at an all-time great level. Talking about one of the most productive backs in NCAA history, a guy that almost broke Barry Sanders' rushing record. This is a guy that's going to be very difficult for Boise State to replace. I think it'll be a committee by backfield, and hope for the best here for Boise State. But Sire Gaines is really a promising running back that hopefully, if he comes back from injury, should take over as that number 1 back. I'm also looking at Tyler Booker from Alabama, how they're going to replace him. No member of the Alabama offensive line took more snaps than him last season. This is a guy that started 27 games over the past 2 years for the Crimson Tide. And this was a tight position battle, so redshirt senior Gino Vandemark, as well as Texas A&M transfer Kam Dewberry, have kind of been battling it out. Vandemark, he missed the end of spring camp with injury, so the edge going into the summer at least belongs to Kam Dewberry, who's a guy that had made 5 starts in 32 career games with Texas A&M, 6'4", 345, big guy that can play guard, but Alabama really doesn't have a ton of depth. They're going to miss Tyler Booker this year. I bet Kam Dewberry and Gino Vandemark both see the field this year for Alabama, but they're surely going to miss Tyler Booker, who was a great guard for them and a consistent lineman the past 2 seasons. It sounds like it's going to be one of those 2 guys, though. I would probably give the edge to Dewberry right now, but this is going to be a battle that goes on into the spring, I think. Then, obviously, from Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka, number 19 overall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. the Ohio State wide receiver factory keeps going on, and the next guy up is Brandon Inniss. So Ohio State does return, obviously Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and then replacing Egbuka is most likely going to be Brandon Inniss, I think. This is a guy that only caught 14 passes last year for a little under 200 receiving yards, but also did haul in a 21-yard touchdown catch in their win at Penn State last year. A guy that has a bunch of talent for Ohio State. I'm also looking at Mylan Graham, potentially. These are guys that were really high 4-star recruits, low 5 stars. A bunch of talent there at that position for Ohio State. But it's probably going to be Brandon Inniss or Mylan Graham that kind of takes over that role. But Emeka Egbuka, all-time leader in receptions for Ohio State. I believe he's top 3 in career receiving yards. A guy that produced a lot and was consistent for the Buckeyes. So that consistency in the slot, the ability to consistently get past the chains, create first downs, that's going to be a tough replacement, but these guys are uber talented. I think Brandon Inniss probably has the edge. Sounds like Mylan Graham has had a really impressive spring, though. I wouldn't count him out either. Another guy I think is going to be interesting is how Texas replaces Jahdae Barron, who went number 20 overall to the Denver Broncos. I think there's 2 guys here. I think Malik Muhammad is one. I'm really high on him personally. I love his pro football focus numbers. I think his overall coverage grade, overall cornerback grade, and just kind of the traits that he brings can make him potentially first-round cornerback last year. And then you also have Jaylon Guilbeau, who is kind of following a similar trajectory to Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron was a guy that primarily played slot for them, moved to outside corner last year, and that's kind of where he thrived. That's going to be what Jaylon Guilbeau is doing this year. He primarily played what Texas calls their star position, which is basically their slot nickelback kind of role. But he looks to follow that similar trajectory. Those are 2 guys I think could replace Jahdae Barron on the outside for Texas. And two cornerbacks that I think are both super talented. I am more high on Malik Muhammad. Other people are higher on Jaylon Guilbeau. But this is a room that I think will still be in a pretty good spot for Texas for the upcoming year. Then I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Oregon with them replacing left tackle Josh Conerly Jr. Went number 29 overall to the Washington Commanders. And this is a big position, obviously. You have a new starting quarterback in Dante Moore that you're going to want to protect. You're losing a bookend guy. But they bring in a transfer that Dan Lanning has really praised and lauded for his performance throughout the spring since he arrived in Eugene, in former Nevada lineman Isaiah World. So Isaiah World is a guy that is really experienced, has started 35 games over the past 3 seasons in the Mountain West, should be expected to start right away. And then this is a guy that can also really be a high draft pick and sought after in next year's draft class. Kind of similar to how Josh Simmons did that after transferring from San Diego State to Ohio State. I think Isaiah World can do something similar for the Oregon Ducks, should solidify that left tackle position for them as they look to protect new starter Dante Moore, who does have some experience after his freshman year at UCLA, but didn't really play last season, is still stepping into a new role. They're going to have to protect him, and it looks like Isaiah World is going to be the main guy that kind of does that for Oregon. Then, similarly, Josh Simmons from Ohio State, who went 32nd to the Chiefs. This is going to be a guy that's going to be tough to replace. Even though he got hurt in October, so Ohio State had to replace him throughout last season. They had Zen Mikulski start there for a game, then he got hurt. And so then they put star left guard Donovan Jackson at left tackle, and now Donovan Jackson and Josh Simmons are both gone. So Ohio State brings in Ethan Onianwa from Rice, 3-year starter who has played more than 2,000 career snaps. He should solidify the blind side there, as Ohio State also looks to replace their starter and bring in a first-year starter, and most likely Julian Sayin could potentially be Lincoln Keenholz. Regardless who takes snaps as the starting quarterback, they're going to need to protect him. Seems like Onianwa is going to be the guy that does that for them. Not a ton of depth here, but this should be another guy that's going to step in after being a 3-year starter. Should step into that starting role, and they kind of hope that he has a similar path as Josh Simmons, right? Josh Simmons started at San Diego State and then stepped into a really big role for Ohio State, kind of showcased his talent there. They hope this can be something similar in Ethan Onianwa. And honestly, Oregon's kind of the same way right now with Isaiah World and replacing those big bookend tackles, wanting to protect a new quarterback. It's going to be interesting, though, how those guys mesh in terms of offensive line is always a unit. You need to be cohesive. It's a unit that has to work together a lot. I think both those teams, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of protect their new quarterbacks. And those two transfers in Isaiah World and Ethan Onianwa, they're going to be guys, big reasons of that enhanced protection, I'll say, for those two programs. So we're going to take another quick break here on the GSMC College Football Podcast. When we come back, we're going to preview some quarterbacks, talk about next year's draft, who could potentially come out from that quarterback position. But we will be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.